Welcome to Wealthy Living Conversations, episode 45. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wealthy Living. It's here that I connect with a variety of wonderful people to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. So I'd like to welcome my beautiful, wise guest today, Silfath Pinto. She's a woman of grace and confidence and exudes a magnetism that draws women all over the world to step into their own brilliance. So welcome, Silfath.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Oh, pleasure. So today we're going to talk about feminine wisdom and life force energy of women and how it impacts the way that we live, the way that we love, and the way that we lead. So before we get into this juicy topic, let me introduce you formally to this divine medicine woman. So Silfath is a practitioner of the healing arts and wisdom and a sacred wisdom keeper who has spent the last 10 years traveling the world and supporting individuals into stepping into their brilliance and becoming happiness alchemists. Her clients have experienced beautiful paradigm shifts, from changing jobs to starting a new career, from letting go of past hurts to moving to a new city, from meeting their life partner and improving relationships, from losing weight to flourishing in radical self-love. Clients often refer to her as an energy shifter, a soul whisperer, and a magic maker. But Silfath has not only worked in the healing arts. She graduated from one of the top 5 business schools in France and worked in finance for 6 years. Upon moving to New York, she enrolled in a feminine awakening movement class, and that was the beginning of her tapping into the gifts and remembering the magic of being a medicine woman. Since then, she has transformed her life, moving from banking to personal styling to training in a number of transformative healing modalities, and for the last 10 years offering transformational coaching and feminine leadership programs, offering a unique fusion of body energetics, shamanic healing, and cellular reprogramming, which fosters deep shifts at a cellular level, clearing wounds, patterns, and beliefs that are preventing us from living to the fullest of our potential. She loves sharing insights on owning your own presence in the world, as well as mixing business strategy with energy alchemy to define and create success on your own terms. Wow. So welcome. And it's, that was a lot to read and a long bio, but I just thought it was important to cover all of that because you are an exceptional woman who's done so much and brings so much magic to so many women. And, you've gone on such a journey to get to this place. So maybe we could start, if you could just tell me and the listeners a little bit about your journey and your pathway to embracing this femininity.
Well, for me, there were many turning points, but the first turning point was when I was living in New York. I was living in banking. I'd done everything right. I had the good job in finance. I had the husband. I had the apartment with the view on Central Park. And on paper, my life was perfect. Inside, I felt like I was living someone else's life. I felt like someone was going to wake me up one day and be like, hey, no, that was not the real life. Like, here's the real life. And so there was a disconnect, but I couldn't really put words to it. I couldn't really explain what was going on. And what happened is that I went to this, back then it was a pole dancing class called S Factor. And what this woman did is absolutely brilliant because the way she introduced it, it was like a fun workout for women, right? Because at this time, it was back in 2006. At this time, the whole conversation around feminine energy, around our body, around life force energy, around the sexual energy and what is sexual energy, all that conversation was not comfortable for many, right?
Yeah.
So she made it accessible with like, oh, come to have fun and do a workout. But then what really that class was, when you progress in the curriculum, it was a returning back to your body, remembering what it is to be a woman, and reclaiming your sacred sexuality. Because your sexual energy is your life force energy. It's your energy of creation. It's your energy of transformation. And women, for the last thousands of years, have been conditioned to be disconnected to their bodies, to ignore what it is to be a woman and what is feminine energy, and definitely not to own our sexuality. So when I went into that journey, what happened is that I came back to myself. I really started landing in myself, in my body, in my truth, in my voice. And then I was like, okay, this job doesn't work for me. So I left this job and I became a personal stylist. And then with my husband, there were a lot of things that were not working, but I didn't have the courage, the strength, and the clarity to understand what was going on and to open a conversation. I did it. I was hoping it would go well. It didn't go so well, in the sense that we realized that we couldn't figure out a common ground, and I had a divorce. So within 2-3 years, I went through a complete rebirth because I started a new business. I went through a divorce. And then when you are in your body, you have those callings. I was done with New York. I had to go. And I didn't know where to go. So I said, okay, when you don't know what to do, but you feel where you are is not right, shift the energy. Do something bold. I left New York. I went to London. My brother lives there. And then from that place in London, Dubai came into my field, and I moved to Dubai as now a personal stylist and a movement therapist, right? Because this movement that changed my life, eventually when I started becoming more and more aligned, I felt called to train and to teach, movement and feminine energy and healing through movement. So that was for me, I think, one of the biggest turning point in my life. That's where I really, I think, awakened as a woman, as a teacher, as a healer.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And what a transformation in such a short time of really getting to a point where you're really owning what is in alignment and what isn't. And I know that that's such a hard thing to do for a lot of people. Like, it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that. And it takes a lot of really being willing to connect to yourself. So really connect to becoming more self-aware. So I'm wondering, how important do you think it is to connect to our personal core foundations to be able to successfully follow our inner desires and to create positive impact for ourselves and for those around us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the base. You know what I say? I say our journey here is about unwrapping a gift. And that gift is ourselves. Like, we are literally here unveiling who we are. And I really see that as like unwrapping a gift and be like, oh, it's a bit heavy. Oh, it smells like that, And it's really that. It's that with each layers, you discover, oh, I had this pain. I went through those experiences. I learned that. Oh, I have those gifts. I have this voice. I have this passion. And it's like the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. The masterpiece is unfolding. That's our journey here. And if we can enjoy that journey and do that journey with as much love as we can. So that's the foundation. And a big part of it for me is to be in the body. The body never lies.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's interesting, because that was sort of the next area I really wanted to talk about with you, because research says that, if you want to change your life, not to start in your mind, but to start in your body. So like you just said, it's the wisdom of the body, and the body doesn't lie. And I know for you, and what you've discussed before, is that the movement therapy and the dance, and this dance class was what first instigated you to realize this knowing. And
Mhm.
so let's talk a little bit about the magic in movement and
Yeah.
connecting to our pleasure and our joy and the ripple effects that that
Mm.
has, including discovering our own uniqueness and our own style and our own, life, let's call it purpose for the sake of this.
Okay. So the first thing to know about movement is that um, the more there's flow in your body, the more there is flow in your life, right? So the sacral chakra, the lower belly, which is the sacral chakra, is the center of creation. It's also the center of movement, and it's also the center of pleasure,
Mm,
right? So the energy of movement and flow is regulated also by the chakra who has pleasure and who has sexual energy and has creation, right? So for us to be more in our body and more in flow in our body, it's for us to be a pulse, to be truly alive in our body, and to be truly connected to our capacity to move from one energy to another, from one state to another, and creation to birth new aspect of ourselves, right? So movement is not just sitting and dancing. Movement is life force, it's aliveness, it's creation.
mm,
That's number one. Number two about movement is that your nervous system is wired, right? So your nervous system has program, has pathways, right? So when you have certain pathways that are anchored in fears, or certain pathways that are anchored in, I see this situation, I react this way. This is programming your nervous system. Movement therapy can help you create new pathway in your nervous system. New pathway in your nervous system are new beliefs. And
mm,
so there are new realities.
yep. And
Okay? So let me give you an example. A woman who is not in her body and doesn't have flow in her body, the energy in her womb is very static.
mm,
So her capacity to flow in life and to create new energy, new opportunities is reduced. That's why a lot of people find themselves stuck, right? Because even in their body, in the center of creation, there is not enough flow. The life force energy is not moving freely. That's number one. So when I work with women, one of the first things that I do is teach them how to land in their body, how to see where energy is not flowing, and through movement and through breath start moving, right? It's like getting out of traffic jam, getting unstuck, right?
yeah.
When you do that, right, a lot of the energy that we're stuck here, hiding here, start coming to the surface, right? So what happened a lot of time is people come to my session and they start crying, or they start shaking, or they start feeling some pain. Why? Because all this energy was stuck.
Mm,
So when that energy start moving, that means that now you can release it, whatever happened,
mm,
and then move on to whatever you're ready to create. Because as long as energy is stuck, you stay in the old energy, right? So the first part about movement, creation, and flow is understanding that it is essential for us to cultivate that in order to flow in our lives and
yeah.
to keep growing and expanding. The second thing is I also use movement for reprogramming. Someone has a programming that is not safe to receive, or it's not safe to be seen, right? Through movement and creating a sacred space, the nervous system of that person can enter a conversation and a dance where she is being seen. And in that being seen, she's being celebrated, loved, and supported and accepted.
Mm,
So that moment where she's about to start dancing in front of those women, all the programming and nervous system is like, it's not safe. She will start shaking. She'll be like, I cannot do it. She will feel like throwing up.
mm,
All this is stored in the system. And then when we support her and she pushes through that energy and she does it and she receives so much love, a nervous system has registered a new programming. It
mm,
is safe for me to be seen. It is safe for me to shine. It is safe for me to express.
mm.
right? So that's why movement is so powerful, and there are so many layers. Like, I just love it, and I could speak about it for hours. But I think this is the two things that are really important to understand, is that from movement and a conscious movement comes flow, comes awareness, comes healing, but it gives you also the power to shift your energy, to reprogram your nervous system, and to open new possibilities in your life. Because as long as a pathway, a program that is anchored in fear is in your nervous system, it keeps you in that reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many gold nuggets in so much that you shared then. And I think that, our thoughts and our beliefs and our feelings really impact our behavioral choices.
Of course.
And so, the choices that we make and the way that we carry ourselves are going to be impacted if we don't have that flowing energy. And movement, as you said, brings that flowing energy. So sometimes I think a lot of people who haven't necessarily experienced ecstatic dance or experienced dance in a full-bodied way, and just as in, like you said before, just bopping to some music or something, they don't really experience the benefits that this that when we flow due to movement, that everything flows more easily. And we have greater clarity with our thoughts and our beliefs. And not only that, I think the other important part is it allows us, like you said, when you've had women who have, been quite resistant to maybe getting up and dancing and being seen, and that brings up a lot for them. But just doing that as well brings awareness to our thoughts, to our beliefs about ourselves, to our beliefs about, like you said, approaching that class in the beginning for you in New York. You had a whole set of beliefs about what that could mean, and so when we do something that isn't necessarily something we're used to experiencing, it helps us also conquer some things that need changing, because it brings that awareness back. And allows for that greater self-awareness that I talked about in the beginning about the core foundations. So I'm really feeling like, even that description of yours and that sharing that you said about the benefits and that experience in your classes or your programs is that awareness of our thoughts and our beliefs and our feelings about ourselves. And then once we shift those.
And that's exactly what you said, is that through movement, through embodiment, there's two layers that really come. There is a layer that is awareness, because your body reacts a certain when you're like, oh, like I did a course last time and we did the blindfolded exercise, and I do the blindfolded exercise to address issues around control and trust. And literally, everyone gets in the blindfold, and there is one woman in the group, she's just looking at like, when I said we're going to be blindfolded, like everything, like she was like looking at me like, you must be kidding me, I'm not doing this, right? And so everyone is going, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, hey, like what's going on with you? And she's like, I don't want to do it. And I was like, what is that about? And so she looked at me and she was like, okay, let me go through it. And literally she did the blindfold, her whole body started shaking, she started crying. But then when that left, she just started moving. And then she came back and she was like, I just had a realization for this exercise. The reason why I cannot connect with my husband is because I always want to control. And because I always want to control, I don't open up to him. In the same exercise, another woman came back from the exercise and she said, oh, I have horrible pain in my womb. I have my period. By the time we were done with this dance, he was gone. I asked her, what do you think happened? She said, when I got into that zone where nothing else mattered, I came into peace and I relaxed completely. Right? And so you with all those embodiment exercise, you start you know, our body is a beautiful, you know what I like to say to people? It's like you have an iPhone 10, I don't know what is the latest, but you using your body like it's a Nokia 3310. It's like our body is like this amazing alchemy and this like super powerful computer, and we just use it to make phone calls. Hello. Literally, this is how I describe it.
We don't use it as a smartphone.
No, at all. And so people are like in my program, the women like one time we did a breathing exercise, 3 of them had orgasm. They were like, so we came back for the breathing, and I'm like, so anyone wants to share? And like some of them send me private message, is that normal? Normal? And I said yes, because we activated your life force energy, we activated your capacity to experience pleasure, and that's what happened, and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back a little bit to when you said the word control, because I think that is a huge topic. And I also, incorporating in that, wanted to talk a little bit about the dance between resisting and embracing. Because I think control falls under that as well. And so I'm sure that you've experienced that dance with a lot of your clients between I want to do it and embrace it and I want the change, but I'm resisting the change. And, you know, there's a lot of resistance, and then there's embracing, and that dance between, you know, stepping in, stepping back, stepping in, stepping back. And what does that look like? And I want to bring you to bring the idea of control into that.
I'm going to talk about control and resistance a little bit differently. And, you know, control is a big conversation, but I want to bring one aspect to it. I think our relationship with control ultimately is our relationship with feeling safe.
Yeah.
And it's our relationship with life and trusting. So if you live in a universe that is not threatening to you, if you believe that life is dancing with you, not trying to punish you, if you're not always expecting something bad to happen, then you don't have that need for control. Right? So it comes down to, is the unknown threatening?
And for or it is.
Yeah, for most people it is.
Yeah.
Right? For most people it is. Is the unknown threatening? Is the unknown a possibility for expansions and magic, or a possibility for heartbreak and trouble? Which ultimately define your relationship with life. Because the bottom line is, we don't know.
No, we don't.
Look at 2020, all the plans. Like, I mean, if the universe wanted to kind of like put like the elephant in the room and be like, I've been trying to tell you nicely, but you don't want to get it. So let me just bring it to the next level and be a little bit louder. Yeah. Control is an illusion. Deal with change.
Absolutely. And I think that what I've come to realize, and I think I've realized this in different ways as time's gone by, but I think I wrote something about it recently, that I think that is the biggest challenge or test of human existence. You know, you say, why are we here? And I think that the big test that we're here is to learn to embrace uncertainty. And I think that's when we get to really master that, I think that we're allowed to have the leave pass. You know?
I used to hate uncertainty, and I used to be a big planner, plan everything. But what I realized at one point is that my need to control was limiting my capacity to welcome magic in my life.
Yep.
So I needed to figure out a way to have focus, to have structure, but not to want to control. It's two different energy.
Yeah.
And one thing that really helped me in my journey is understanding the feminine masculine dance, right? The feminine energy is more, if you look even at our genitals, the feminine is the unknown. If you look at the womb, it is this cave. You don't really know what it is. It's this infinite pool of creation. And then if you look at the masculine and you look at the genital, it's out there, right? So the feminine is unknown, uncertainty, mystery. The masculine is certainty, structure, knowing, planning, results, right? None of them are bad. They're complementary, right? The feminine and the masculine are two fundamental energies that are complementary. But before, we were not in balance. We were in the shadow of the masculine, where we wanted to control no all the time, and would not allow the magic to come to us through uncertainty, because we were so much in fear, right? So for me, what I say to most women I work with, and this is why, I do the blindfold and everything, right? So when we do the blindfold and we're dancing, you have the women who, you put them the blindfold, they stay against the wall. They literally don't move. You have the woman, you put the blindfold and they're like, oh, okay, let me go and explore. And then when they meet something, they don't go, they go, oh, what's that? Oh, it makes some noise. What is this? And they start playing with it. They allow the magic to come into the life. But most women, that's not what they will do. Most women will stay against the wall. Or most women, as soon as they touch something, their nervous system is so wired into fear, they will go like this. Because we've been so wired to be in fear and to expect something bad to happen.
Yeah.
Now, I need to add something to that. I work with archetypes. And this is what I say. The more a woman is connected to the archetype of the fierce Amazon, boundaries, protection, sacred angers, speaking your truth, standing up for yourself, the more a woman can be in her ecstatic lover, dancing with life, being in flow, surrendering, trusting, because she knows that a fierce Amazon is creating the right field and the right environment for an ecstatic lover to be alive. But because most women, the fierce Amazon is not alive, obviously, it doesn't feel safe to be an ecstatic lover. So for me, for instance, I can be up and I can be open and I can be trusting and I can go into a country I barely know because I feel called to go there, but I don't know why I feel called to go there. But because I know that my fierce Amazon will make sure that I am safe.
Yep. So
right?
So really, that's just a lot about, I suppose, embracing all of who we are. And it's that, and I think that there's that, yes, you can look at it as in all the different archetypes, but I think you can also look at it in as balancing the masculine and the feminine within us and embracing both. And I think that there's quite a paradox of womanhood in that ability to balance that masculine and feminine, and it's from the outside and the inside, because sometimes they don't match.
This is a very good point. The feminine and the masculine energy, they reside in everyone, right? And the bottom line, whether we talk about archetype, whether we talk about feminine, masculine, all this conversation come back to what we said before. It's coming into mastery of who you are.
Absolutely.
Because when you come into mastery of who you are, your feminine and your masculine, your fierce Amazon, your queen, your tigress, like all those aspects of this masterpiece. And this is what life is. It's like a big revelation, right? It's like we are being called to actualize all those aspects of ourselves so that we can really create magic in our lives, right? But the key is to realize that life is not trying to punish you. Life is not trying to force you or threaten you. Life is an hologram, a reflection of your level of awareness and mastery. Right? And a big part of your level and awareness and mastery is understanding that you have an iPhone 10, not a Nokia 3310 in your body. And then learning how to navigate that powerhouse and also discovering the essence of you, right? And expressing more and more the essence of you. Which brings me to the resistance part. When I work with clients, I call it resistance, but what I came to realize is that each person has a different journeys. And my job and my gift as a facilitator is to tailor a journey that is as gentle and loving as possible for my client, so that they don't get that fearful, that triggered, and that resistant. Because resistance at the end of the day is the inner child being really scared and being really in trauma. So I believe in tenderness. I believe in love. I don't take bullshit from my client. If I see they're bullshitting, I'll be like, no. Like everyone who has worked with me knows that I don't take bullshit. Like I'm a very loving mama, but at the same time, I'm like, right? So like when people come to my retreat and I see that they're not really diving in, I will call them out and I'll be like, come, let's have a talk, right? And so that's that navigation as a facilitator between how do I create a journey that really brings transformation, but not bringing people back into trauma. That's not what we're trying to do, right? Yeah, so I would say, if you feel you have resistance, and when people feel a resistance, instead of focusing on the story of resistance, focus on the story of what is the change, or what can I handle right now, right? There is always a way.
And I think that you know, that in itself, I suppose, that and what you were just talking about before, I think can lead very much into the idea of self-love and self-compassion. And I think that piece is a really important piece to be able to bring all of ourselves to the table and to the world, because we have to have the self-love and self-compassion in order to do that. So in saying that, what are some tips that you could share with us in being able to make these self-loving, self-compassionate choices? I mean, to have these boundaries, to, you know, to love ourselves through different parts of ourselves, to have that acceptance, that self-acceptance, and the acceptance on faith of what else is happening. Like, what are some things that people could do, and practices and tips that could, you know, enhance those aspects?
So there are many coming my way. So one thing that I would give some tips around the body. Okay, breath, movement, touch. Right? I say to people, be as loving to your body that you are to the people you love, to your children, to your friends, to your mother, right? So take time to breathe deeply. It's basic, but you know what? Simple things actually work. And simple things are the things that are often forgotten. Most people are not breathing properly.
And that's our life force as well, you know, like we're talking about the life force in our wombs and our sexual energy, but we're also, I mean, life force is also the air that we breathe.
The prana, right? The energy. So the first thing that I would say to people every day, you know, I have a very simple practice that I do with my client. It's really, we breathe. I make people open the mouth because the muscle of the jawline are related to the muscle of the belly. So when we relax the jawline, we relax the belly, and so we open up the energy to flow, right? So this is a very simple. And when you inhale, you feel the breath in the belly, in the heart, in the shoulders, expanding. And when you exhale, you feel yourself grounding into your center. That's a very simple practice. You can literally take little spots in your day and breathe. What happens when you do that is you land more and more in your body, but also you calm down your nervous system. Okay, that's number one. Then, if you can, combine it with touch. Right? Most people don't actually touch. Touch is the most healing tool accessible to us. How many times you like feel so stressed or you feel like you're about to cry, and a hug and a touch just make you release the cry or make you soften or make you feel safe. And people don't touch themselves. Even women who put cream every day, they put cream every day, but it's not a conscious touch. So I say to people, take time to touch your face. All right? Touch your heart. Touch your belly. And you will see that most people, when they do that, they actually feel awkward first. They actually feel awkward touching their bodies.
Yeah, which in itself is crazy.
Yeah, it is. Every time people do that, I can see the kind of, okay.
Yeah.
The kind of, okay, I'm touching, but I'm not really touching. I don't really want to connect, right? So the touching is also calming for your nervous system. It's calming for your inner child.
Mm.
And then the third tip related to the body is movement. Movement that is not just moving your body, but movement that is having a conversation with your body.
Mm.
Right? Think about a cat stretching. When a cat stretch, she's not just doing this. She's like, oh, yeah, that feels, there's something, that felt good. That's how a cat moves. Right? And you can feel it when you watch them. They're like, oh yeah, and this is really what's happening. So people a lot of time move, but they move mindlessly.
Yeah.
Right? They're really present and having that conversation and be like, oh, that felt really tight. Okay. Ooh. And then that becomes a listening, a conversing, a honoring of your body. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step of tip: breath, touch, movement. The second step, one tip that I can give to people is about boundaries. Women in particular have a really hard time speaking the truth and having clear boundaries. A lot of women don't even actually know what are their boundaries, right? And the thing is, the more your fierce Amazon, your boundaries and your integrity is clear, the more you trust yourself. And the more you trust yourself, the more you trust life. So one thing that I teach women is when you get yourself in situations that feel uncomfortable, go home and ask yourself, what was my boundary here? What part of myself was not honored? Is it a physical boundary, an emotional boundary, a mental boundary, a spiritual boundary? I'll give you a very simple example. I was at a dinner last time and someone said, us as women beings, we are suffering creatures. I look at him and I say, no. For me, it's a boundary there. And if I don't speak my truth, I am allowing this energy and that belief I allow myself to be included in that field. Sovereignty, ownership over my energy. I said, no. Speak for yourself. I'm not a suffering creature. I am all about ecstasy. A suffering creature is a victimhood mindset. I'm not a victim, I'm a creator.
Love it.
But I have practiced so much. I am so aware of my field and my energy, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Right? But it takes time. But when you go like this and you don't really know what happened, right? You're like, you go home and you're like, that conversation, what was there? And if it was the boundaries, what is my truth there? Speak it in front of the mirror. It's a very powerful practice because your energetic field is going to start becoming thicker and stronger and clearer. And then in real life situation, because you have practiced the muscle, you will start doing it right away.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely. Because I think continue.
The last tip is we spend a lot of time focusing on the things we don't do right. And I think it's good to spend time owning our magic. So I ask people to make a list of things they do really well, to make a list of their achievement, to make a list of messages, compliments they receive from people, and put it somewhere, do a board, put it in a notebook, and regularly look into it and remind yourself how magical you are.
Yeah, I also get clients to do that.
Because I think we've been so trained to be like, oh, I'm not good at this. And even, oh, am I being cocky saying that I'm so good at that? Am I cocky saying that I did this well? I'm like, why can you talk about all the things that you need to improve and you cannot talk about all the things about you that are amazing?
Yeah.
Balance.
Absolutely. And I think that with that one, as well as being able to not fear the consequence of speaking up like you did at that dinner party, being able to have that assertive communication, have boundaries, and live in alignment, and is comes down to valuing ourselves, so our self-worth. And
And you know what? I feel like when you strengthen that muscle, you learn how to say those truth, your truth, without being aggressive.
that's assertive
You
communication.
in a way, it's just a statement. I was like, my dear friend, no, 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 no. And I was even laughing about it. And so I am being in my truth, and hopefully in me being in my truth, I am activating a knowledge, a wisdom, a knowing that we all have in maybe one or two other people in that room, right? So me being in my truth and being anchored in my alignment, cannot hurt anyone as long as I am in love. I'm anchored in love.
Yes. And you also then act as almost like a role model that gives other people permission to act in their truth as well.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
actually
yeah,
give the gift of that to
yeah,
other people. And
yeah.
there's no doubt that there will be times that when we do speak our truth, even if we do it with really good assertive communication where we're being straight but with boundary, with respect, that there will be people that will be offended and take things personally, but remembering that is because they haven't got to that place, that they've got good self-worth, that they feel secure, so they're on the defense all the time and are going to be and that is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to be honest and respectful and follow our own inner compass.
Exactly. Exactly.
I want to bring something else up there about this self-love piece, because there is this fight often in people's minds between that inner cheerleader and that inner saboteur. So, and which voice gets more airtime? And it's like we want our cheerleader to be getting all the airtime, but so often that inner critic just takes over. And it's a really hard one, I think, for a lot of people. And if you're not, masterful at being in your truth yet, which most people, to be honest, haven't got to that place, and they have snippets of that place, but on a consistent basis, the success in that is relatively hard for a lot of people. And the inner critic takes over. And what sort of maybe suggestions or insights could you offer around that?
Elizabeth has a part in her a book Big Magic where she talks about that, and she calls it the road trip, and basically fear is invited in the road trip, but fear is like sitting in the back, and she has a whole pep talk with fear. She's like, okay, I'll let you come, but basically you're not driving, you're not taking any decision, you're just sitting in the back, And so, I read it and I just loved it because she has such a very visual way and nice way to address things. And I have a similar approach that I give to my client is, think about that part of you that is that inner critic, that fearful one, that as, a part of you that is somehow trying to keep you safe, right? Or somehow very anchored in fear. Don't do this thing, people are going to criticize you. Or who do you think you are to think that you're going to speak at this thing in front of 200 people? You're going to mess it up, right? And I think it also goes back again to self-love and compassion.
Yep.
One trick that I give to people is give a look, visualize that person, give her a name, okay? And just be really loving to her, but kind of dissociate a little bit from her, right? I say to people, each one of us is a corporation. There are so many identities and energies in each one of us, right? Each one of us is such a unique, it's like a masterpiece, like how many colors you can have in a masterpiece, right? So we, like what I said before, we have the fierce Amazon, we have the queen, we have the ecstatic lover, we have the wounded child, we have like so many layers. And it's learning how to navigate all those layers masterfully. And so that part of you is another part of you that is just really scared. So you want to be loving and hugging and being like, okay, what do I need to do to make you feel safe? But we're still moving forward. We are still doing it. Okay? But I'll do my best to make sure you are okay, to make sure you feel safe. Right? And that's the conversation that you need to have with that voice. So that voice is not anymore the main voice in your head. It's one of the voices. And when you start dissociating from that voice and addressing her, you can also parallel to that start activating your cheerleader. Right? And your cheerleader is going to be the one. And at the beginning, it will take time because you are used to language, right? Some people, it's like saying I love you. When you never said I love you, some people have a hard time saying it, right? So, if you are used to say, what's wrong with you, right? You're going to feel awkward thinking, oh my God, what you did was just amazing, right? So in my group, when I ask people to voice, like, in my Facebook group, we have the Thursday we do gratitude. Sexy Spirited Saturday it's one of the day where we brag about all the things we do that are amazing. This is the one where I have to wrestle with them to get them to brag, because most of the time, but the day where you have to talk about what difficulty you went through and what were your challenge, everyone is chatty. Sexy Spirited Saturday, that's the one where everyone struggle with. So at the beginning, it's a muscle. So you're going to just learn how to say, good job. Oh, that was good. Like, I do that, right? I learn how to, when I do something good or when a session went really well or whatever, when I finish, I say, good job, Silfath. Oh, that was good. So, but you just train yourself. And each one of us is different. Remember what I said about resistance. There's not one way to do that. So some people is going to be, when I wake up in the morning, I spend some time saying, you know what? Good on you for being such a courageous woman and dealing with all your shit and really wanting to move forward in your life, whatever, right? Some of it's going to be like a happy dance, whatever it is, right? But I think there's two layers to your question. There's the layer of really dealing with the fearful one, and at the same time, slowly starting to activating the cheerleader.
Yeah.
You want to do the two together.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think just to add to that, I suppose another, everyone kind of resonates with different analogies and stuff like that. And something that I often do is maybe just look at, like you're talking about, the inner critic maybe being this sort of little friend or other part of you that you sort of just comes along. It also, for me, I look at it, and I've worked with clients where you're looking at it being the inner parent and the inner child, and the inner critic is the child. So you are parenting, especially if I'm talking to people that are parents themselves, because they can relate, because it's like, well, treat your inner child, like that critic, as if it was your outer child. What would you say to that outer child to comfort them, to tell them it's okay, to allow them to just be, what would you say? So it's that same thing, I think, that often works, is that analogy of looking at like an inner parent and an inner child. So that's, I suppose, what I could add maybe to that conversation about the critic.
Yeah. And you know what? There is something else also that I want to just say quickly about that. Sometimes I also like to say to people, I would say I like to bring the distinction between the inner child and the wounded child.
Yes.
And I think this is a good moment to talk about it, because if we think about it,
that playful.
When we were younger, before we had that, all the trauma, all the conditioning we've been through, we were really good cheerleaders.
Yeah, that's
right.
interesting.
You will tell people, okay, let's read a story.
Yeah, totally. So there's that, the inner child's let's actually bring that pleasure, fun, joy, dancing child out so that one moves freely. So that is really important.
You have the wounded child, but then you have the before wounded or the raw child, who is the best cheerleader ever.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that, because I think that that's also really important, especially because nowadays there's so much terminology that gets flown around and people associate certain words with meaning certain things. So that's great. And then on the flip side, when we talk about the champion, when you were talking then, I think that, it's that feeling of, and I think that maybe this time of COVID where people are slowing down, it gives that opportunity maybe for allowing us to savor those moments of completion or championing ourselves, because generally a lot of people, it's not that they go, I don't want to champion myself. It's that they're running from one task to another, that they've finished one thing and they don't give themselves that pleasurable state and space to savor for just even a couple of minutes the feeling of completion before moving on to the next task.
One thing after the other, and bam and bam and bam and bam. And this is what I say to women who do, for instance, my online program. I say to them, how much of the shift are you truly receiving? Like, how much time are you really giving yourself to pause and to really grasp all the shift that you have observed, all the mastery that you have developed, all the tools that you have received, right? And this is another gift with COVID, because in every situation there are gifts. It's the slowing down, right? It's the forcing everyone to slow down. And that goes back to what I said before. We didn't want to be comfortable with the uncertainty and the unknown, which are more feminine aspect. And it's like, bam. And so COVID, in a way, with all the polarity and all the conversation, vaccine, virus, theories about, some kind of, okay, all this is there. But again, where our attention goes, that's what we're going to create. Yeah. So for me, I like to see the gifts. And one of the gifts is also that another feminine energy that has been activated big time, it's being.
Yes.
Right? It's slowing down. And that wisdom, we had lost that wisdom. We were like mad chickens running around and not understanding that there's so much wisdom in being. Right? So, what all my friends and a lot of my clients told me during COVID, during quarantine, the period stopped being painful.
Interesting.
Right? Which means the body and the contraction in your nervous system and the muscles released. Which means we were constantly on fight and flight. And the parasympathetic nervous system gently came down because you slow down.
Yeah.
And you realize that a lot of the ailments we are dealing with as a species are coming from the fact that we are not living balanced life. The reality is women in the normal state shouldn't have painful periods. Right? So painful period is telling us something's out of balance in our life, but it was even telling us that something's out of balance in our species as human beings. Right? So yes, I'm really glad you brought that aspect of the conversation, right? The time to really process and coming to self-mastery requires slowing down and requires being.
Yeah. And I think, and I just totally agree with all of that. And, I personally, in the last 3 years, really slowed down a whole lot of things. And, I really pause quite a bit and do a lot of reflection, a lot of writing, a lot of journaling, which has definitely helped my levels of self-awareness, which then snowballs onto everything because the core foundations are there. But I think the really difficult part for a lot of people that I'm seeing, and I don't know what it's like in Dubai as much, but in especially where I am, where we've got, huge lockdowns, is this, again, this dance and balance between having the space, knowing that it gives us the opportunity and the gift to slow down and reconnect with ourselves, but the difficulty and challenge of when we do that, not buying into the unknown and the uncertainty and not allowing that energy to take over and bring anxiety that the slowing down is supposed to not bring, and so it's this almost dance between those two things and navigating that, and then navigating this whole idea of what you said earlier in the conversation of not being able to hug people, especially if you're living alone, and then being able to embrace touch for ourselves, which feels awkward and uncomfortable. So there's a lot of this discomfort which is happening with the COVID and slowing down, but you and I can see so clearly the gift in that. But I suppose I want to also honour anyone who's listening to know that although we might be able to see that gift, that it doesn't mean that it's easy. It's difficult, it is difficult, and being able to do that and receive those gifts is not necessarily an easy path, but it has extremely positive outcomes.
I think what you said, is the discomfort is necessary because the discomfort is what brings change.
Absolutely.
The discomfort is what brings change. And yes, it's not easy, but it can be easier than we think.
Yep.
Right? It can be easier than we think. Like I did my Women Rising program. It was a 6-week course, and a lot of the women during lockdown signed up for that. And I made this program very accessible. Like the usual value for a program like that would be like around $1,000 for a 6-week course with 2 sessions a week. I made this program available at like $150. I think it was $150 or $170, right? And the reason why I'm sharing that is because there were a lot of opportunities during this period for people to receive support, to receive love, to receive healing, right? Saying that things are difficult could be another conditioning.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm not saying that the women in the program didn't face their shadows and they didn't cry and they didn't feel pain, but they felt it held by other 50 women and guided by someone who knows what she's doing. Right? So even for myself, it was also a challenge. Right? It was a challenge because all my activities shifted in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yes.
Right? The first time you go to the gym or the first time you start exercising, the first time you drove a car, it was challenging because it's a new pathway in your nervous system you're activating. But I feel like once you have a better understanding of what's going on, it gives you more peace and it gives you more ease into dealing with it. This is why I'm so passionate to explain people nervous system, programming, because when they feel that discomfort, they know what's going on, but they know that right there, they have a window to uncover something and to shift something. So everything we can change the mindset, see opportunities and dance with whatever is thrown at us. And the more we do it, the more it becomes easy. Or we can always feel like, it's hard. And yes, the first reaction is going to be it's hard. But it only feels hard because you don't know the tools yet. You need to remember the tools and understand what's happening. Then it's a beautiful journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so much, and like probably a whole nother couple of conversations in there. But this we don't really have time to go over this in too much detail, but just as a summary of what you just said, is that ability to allow, to trust and allow, and then received the gift of receiving, so that we can master receiving. Because as women, I think that is one of the biggest challenges a lot of women resist, that doesn't enable them to actually reach these states of ecstasy and states of, loving life and following what feels really good and trusting, because they just put a barrier to support and receiving. And just trusting that if you're finding doing it on your own is hard, to accept support. And like support from you going through these processes, myself giving a lot of people support. There are so many people. Find the person that you resonate with, and let them hold, like right in the beginning of this conversation, the very beginning, when you talked about those women coming and dancing, where they're able to release was because they were being held in a safe space, and they were being able to be seen and heard in a way that felt safe. And if you can do that, the ability for maximizing change and moving forward and beginning to flow can really, really happen. So I think
enjoying it.
Pardon?
And enjoying it.
That's absolutely, and bringing the pleasure into it. And and something you do so remarkably is the joyful productivity in it. So you are extremely productive, and productivity doesn't have to be heavy and tiring and chore-like. Being productive can be extremely pleasurable and joyful if we let it.
If we let, and if we decide to. This is one thing that I realized in my journeys. At the beginning, as a facilitator, it was all about the healing, but it was so heavy. And then at one point there was a shift, and I was like, wait a minute. I want this process to feel like poetry. I want this process to feel like grace. I want this process to be beautiful.
Absolutely.
And so that's something, because again, it was a change in mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, we have been going for, I think, around the hour mark, just over the hour, but I could so easily go for 2 hours, because there is, and I'm deciding whether, just make this a really long episode.
Make another one. That's what we need to do.
Because, you support women and you do it so beautifully, and flying around social media at the moment is all this women supporting women's hashtags and all that sort of stuff. And that ultimately is the feminine way. But I just feel like maybe women aren't moving there as much, because they're not acting as a collective in collaboration, and there's still this competitive energy, and I know that's often a little bit of a tangent of where we were talking, but it's just something that I really wanted to discuss with you today. But I think we should leave that to another episode. So if you are listening,
I think that one is like, I think that one deserves because there are so many layers into it.
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
Is so there's scarcity, there's so much.
So
there is
everyone, because I think that is a really good conversation to have. So we'll do another episode of that one. But before you do go, I want to just I suppose I just want to touch just really slightly on the on your cultural upbringing. There's been such a big thing, obviously, with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and whether the impact. I mean, you're someone who hasn't let that necessarily stop you from thriving. And I'm
Mm.
wondering whether how your cultural upbringing has impacted your pathway, and how much impact it has on your overall work vision.
I just think that I have a very strong spirit, and deep down, I always had a sense of who I was. So I think even if I have observed a lot of discrimination as a Black person and as a woman, in so many ways, and even if it has affected me, I think deep down there was always a voice within me that was like, this is bullshit. I just always had that knowing within me that, you are who you are. What you are is special. You don't really understand it yet. But, and by the way, I always had that awareness about others also. I didn't allow those conversations and those energies to define me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't allow myself to give them too much power. So I've always had this energy of whatever I want to create with my life, I can do it. Right? Doesn't mean that I didn't have, and I still, I'm still doing reprogramming and clearing old stuff, even ancestral stuff, right? Because we have slavery, we have colonization, we have, which are really deeply engraved in, if you go to Africa, certain part, like big cities in Africa, people are in PTSD, right? Because what people live in Africa, they are being completely and constantly aggressed and targeted, right? And a lot of people haven't recovered for colonization. So when I go to big cities, a lot of people are actually in PTSD, right? So this is where I'm coming from. So yes, there is some healing around it, and yes, there is some growth around it. But yeah, I never allowed those stories to define me. And I'm very proud of also my African heritage, right? I see the beauty in our culture, in our wisdom, in our embodiment. We are very embodied culture, and there is so much power and wisdom there. And I think that makes a big part of who I am as a teacher. Yes. So yeah, I just going back to the conversation we have, I just really embrace all aspects of myself and see the beauty in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and thank goodness you do, because you're offering so much to so many people all over the world. And I would even say, just from what you've said then, is that it probably comes back down again to the reason that you are doing what you were doing and offering what you are offering is because there was a point in time when you're in New York when you weren't doing that, and you came back to your core foundations. And those core, yes, it might have been the dance class that instigated that, but you came back down to your core foundations, which were about knowing yourself, knowing your heritage. You do have that, your heritage has that movement and embodiment and juiciness and, and pouring of love, even with the oppression that it's been through. So you came back to who you really were and what your strengths were and how you could build on that to offer the world your gift.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful lesson and offering that everybody can do, and everybody's uniqueness will be offering the world a different gift in a different way. But we all can be inspirational and to everybody.
We all have medicine.
Somebody. Yeah.
We all have medicine.
Well, thank you so much. And it's I know, we've spoken for quite a while, but I love it. And it's been so beautiful to reconnect. And, it's been so many months. It seems like a lifetime ago that we were on the
We were in Fiji.
on the island of Fiji and having such a good time, and we had such a great connection there, and it's been such a pleasure chatting with you today, and yeah, absolutely loved it. And
I loved it. I think we need to do more of those.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe we should make a series.
Yeah. There's a lot to say.
So if you have been listening today and you've listened right up to this point and you've stayed with us, thank you so much for your time in doing that. And we would love to know what your biggest takeaway or insight is from today's conversation, what tips you may have tried to put into practice, what's worked, and maybe even some of your input that you could share with other people. So just leave a comment and let us know. We'll share the episode on our socials, so you might be have access to from there. Leave a comment on our socials, or else just under the podcast of whatever platform you happen to be listening on. If you want more information about Silfath and her offerings, where can they find you?
I have a website, silfathpinto.com.
Yep.
So it's my name. And then on social media, my handle is silfath.sophia, PHIA. So
perfect. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wealthy Living podcast on iTunes and on YouTube. If you want to find out a little bit more about my services, you can go to my website at Wealthy Living, WELLTHY living.com.au, or you can connect with me on any of my social media channels. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.